안녕하세요, 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌입니다. Welcome to the 5th episode in this series where I analyze the Korean speaking of the group ATEEZ, an 8-member group that debuted in 2018. And so far, I've shared my analysis of Hongjung, Seonghwa, Yuno, and Yeosang. But first, if you're new here, I'm a Korean teacher with 12 years of teaching experience and 20 years of learning the Korean language. So today, I'll be breaking down the Korean speech of Chae-san and giving my professional analysis of him as a Korean speaker, including any unique expressions that he uses or any dialect. And yes, he definitely uses some dialect. But before we start, I need to thank the sponsor of this video, my Patreon supporters and also my channel members. The reason I don't have to put sponsorships in these videos is because of you. And if you would like to help support my channel to make more and better Korean language content, please consider becoming a Patreon member or channel member. And there are links in the description box of this video. As a member, you'll also get access to bonus content like Korean cheat sheets, lesson outlines, and worksheets, and you'll get to help choose the next group that I analyze. Okay, so let's get into today's topic, which is Chae-san.
저요? 선인데요?
선인데요? His name San is unique, and I'll talk about why in a second. So Chae-san was raised in 1999 in the county of Namhae, which is located in the south of Korea. Oh yeah, and it's on an island. In fact, although he was raised in Namhae, he wasn't born there. He was born in the city of Jinju, in fact, the same city where Seonghwa was born. And the reason was since Namhae was on an island, there weren't any hospitals in the nearby area.
제가 태어난 곳은 남해가 아니에요. 난 남해.
진주?
진주.
진짜?
Yes.
왜냐면 병원이 없어. 삼천포라.
Yeah. Namhae is also in the same area of Korea as the city of Jinju, where Seonghwa was from, which is known as the Gyeongsang province. And Gyeongsang province is famous for its unique dialects, several dialects in fact. And you'll also see in this video clip, San also can use dialects skillfully, and he's proud of where he comes from. So here's a short clip where he explains that he's proud of where he comes from and that he doesn't try to hide it.
너무 좋으니까 남해가 너무 좋으니까 저는 내가 이걸 굳이 감추고 사는 것보다는 내가 너무 좋은 추억이 있는 이 동네, 이 마을을 더 알리고 싶다 오히려 이런 게 조금 더 강한 생각이 들죠.
In fact, in 2021, San was even made the official ambassador for Namhae. So if you happen to visit there someday, make sure to let them all know that San sent you. Now let's talk for a moment about Chae-san's name, because it's more unique than you may already know, really. Korean last names are only one syllable, and his is Chae, which is a very common last name. And his last name originally comes from a Chinese character, which looks like this, and its meaning is high. His first name is also only one syllable, San, which is the Korean word for mountain. However, the overwhelming majority of Korean first names actually have 2 syllables, just like all of the other 7 members. One-syllable names are relatively uncommon, although not unheard of, but San's name is unique for 3 extra reasons, because I said that his name San means mountain and his last name Chae means high, so his name literally means high mountain. That's cool fact number 1, but cool fact number 2 is even more unique because the name San doesn't actually mean mountain. And this surprised me too when I found out, because while the word San in Korean does mean mountain, his name isn't actually written using this Chinese character, which is pronounced as San and means mountain. Now, to understand that, I need to give you a really quick culture lesson. Nowadays, when a child is born in Korea, the parents decide their name. Just their name as it is. And their name will just be written using the Korean alphabet, Hangul, and not written with any Chinese characters. Then later, if the parents choose to, and they usually do, they'll decide Chinese characters with the same sounds as their child's name. And they'll make sure that they pick characters that have a good meaning that they want their child to have. For example, if you named your kid Hongjung, then you'd later pick 2 Chinese characters with those sounds, Hong and Jung, that you liked. And there's actually a separate database of Chinese characters that can be used when picking names. So San would have been born as just San, meaning mountain. And then later his parents would have researched an appropriate Chinese character to match his name. So instead, his name is written using a different Chinese character, which is also pronounced San, but actually means umbrella. And this san is the same Chinese character used in the word usan, which means umbrella. Yes, that means that the actual meaning of Chaesan's name is also high umbrella. Now, I should be clear, he's not going around introducing himself as an umbrella. Any Korean who hears the name San is going to think of a mountain and not an umbrella.
제 이름은 산입니다.
네, 반갑습니다.
In fact, he even has a sister named 하늘, meaning sky, and a cat named 별, meaning star. So together you get mountain, sky, and star. I bet you someday he's going to have a kid and name them 달, meaning moon. Now, you're probably wondering why his name is not written with the character that means mountain. And actually, this was intentional for reason number 3, because the Chinese character for mountain, san, also has a not so good second meaning. Traditionally in Korea, graves were built up in mounds, like mountains. So this character, san, is also associated with a grave, which is not a good association you would want to give your child's name. So while his name means mountain, when written, he becomes umbrella. Some say the highest umbrella of them all. And I uncovered so many interesting facts about San while researching for this video. So many that I'm proud to announce right away that my favorite member in ATEEZ is San. So let me tell you all I found out about him, starting with my first impressions. And the first thing that I noticed about San is, well, actually I noticed his English.
Did you rest well? Yes. I'm good.
와터멜론. 네. 워터멜론. 수박.
I mean, you don't even need to watch that second clip. You can just listen for the person who says watermelon perfectly. And although his English grammar, his overall English skills aren't necessarily the best in the group, his pronunciation and intonation makes him sound like he's lived in the US for years. And it's not only when he's speaking a foreign language. San has a secret ability, maybe not so secret, but he has a special skill for imitating sounds. And one of the imitations, first of all, that I heard him do several times was the actor Kim Byung-chul from the drama Sky Castle. And here's a clip of that.
그렇게 꼭대기로 올라가고 싶었는데.
자, 모두 집중해 주시길 바랍니다.
좋아. 꼭대기 해주세요, 꼭대기.
꼭대기. 지금 일어나야 얼른 꼭대기에 오를 수 있다고. 피라미드 꼭대기.
And when you know the references that he's doing in Korean, he's hilarious. Like in this clip where he imitates a watermelon salesman who drive around in trucks and they sell watermelons in Korea while playing an announcement.
자, 달달한 수박 한 통에 5,000원. 자, 지금 아니면 못 사요.
And I saw him doing impressions and making jokes in so many videos of him that I watched. He's always trying to help everyone stay energetic and making the other members laugh. Here's a clip, in fact, where he speaks in Japanese. And he's not just speaking in Japanese, but he's making a really funny dad joke in both Korean and Japanese at the same time. So first listen to the clip and then I'll explain what he says.
내일 밤을 불태우고 그럼요 멋지게 활동하고 있습니다. 그러면 우리가 용입니까 용이 아닙니까? 우린 용이다 난다요. 고래가 되면 뭡니까? 고래가 난다요. 저는 그렇게 생각합니다.
In this episode, they're debating whether several Korean idioms make sense or not. And the idiom that they're debating is 개천에서 용난다, meaning basically rags to riches. And San's argument is that because all of them work really hard, therefore, aren't we all dragons? And then he says, we're dragons, 난다요, meaning kind of, we fly. But if any of you speak any Japanese, you'll know that 난다요 also means, what is it? It's kind of like shouting out in Korean, 뭐야? And of course, all of the other members instantly get the joke. But then San keeps going and says, what is a whale when it flies? Now, the word for whale in Korean is 고래. So San shouts, a whale flies, which is 고래가 난다요, which in Japanese means like, what is this? Or in Korean, you'd say, 이게 뭐야? So it has a double meaning, and I swear it's funnier if I didn't have to dissect the joke. Here's one more example, though.
빨리 일어나. 빨리 일어나. 내 맘에 불이 일어나.
In this clip, he says, 빨리 일어나, meaning hurry and wake up. And then he says, 내 마음에 불이 일어나, meaning a fire awakens in my heart. And this joke's pretty cheesy, though. I also noticed that a lot of the times he speaks using ae-gyo. Now, ae-gyo is anything that's done, usually in speech, to make someone like you more. And you can think of it like sometimes baby talk, or maybe just flirting, but it doesn't have to be that strong. It's basically just anything that sounds intentionally cute. In fact, nearly all singers in Korea use ae-gyo a certain amount, so it's certainly something I wouldn't normally point out, except that San seems to enjoy using ae-gyo a lot more than the other members.
저희 맛 3개씩 먹어도 돼요? 젤라또 여기 이제 마지막으로 먹을 것 같은데 한 번만 해주시면 안 돼요?
안 돼요?
안 돼요? 감독님 안 돼요?
안 돼요?
감독님 저희 젤라또 맛 3개 먹으면 안 돼요? 먹어도 돼요? 아!
빨리 일어나요? 아잉.
And while I normally don't like listening to ae-gyo from anyone because it can easily sound forced, but with San, I think that ae-gyo works with his voice tone. I think that it matches his normal speaking voice because despite all that I've said about how he's good at impressions and that he likes making the other members laugh, San's regular speaking voice is actually low and very soft. And I have another short clip to show you.
괜찮은가요? 네, 마음은 뭐 때때로 다르긴 하지만 근래 들어서는 괜찮은 편입니다.
What he's doing is he doesn't pronounce his words strongly. Everything is softened, so it's not that he's slurring his speech, just that he pronounces his syllables with less force. And you can also hear that really well in this clip.
저희 둘끼리도 항상 하는 얘기가 너가 어떤 일이 일어나도 어떤 짓을 저질러도 너를 질타하기보다는 너에게는 그럴 만한 이유가 있었겠지라고 저희는 항상 생각을 하기 때문에 믿었습니다.
He's adding that extra soft breathing into his speaking. However, when San gets really happy or excited, or when he's joking around with the other members, as well as whenever he's speaking directly to the camera, he speaks a bit louder. And here's an example where he's thanking a restaurant worker for bringing him a bib. And that restaurant worker is actually Mingi pretending to work there.
네, 잠시만 기다려주세요. 자꾸 못 챙겨주시네요. 이런 서비스까지. 네. 예.
And here are a few more clips just to show you a bit more what I'm talking about.
특히 턱긴 특히 턱기 턱기 야라백게 특히 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 타기 Let's keep going man. MBC News Desk man. 그냥 저 사람만 보고 있을 수밖에 없는 거야. 근데 이거는 나랑 다른 아이돌이 있어. 비교 대상이 있는데 나를 안 보고 다른 사람 본다? 그게 맞아.
이건 무슨 의미일까요? 민기는 무슨 그냥 명언을 하고 싶었던 걸까요? 세상에 답은 없죠.
여기가 날씨가 진짜 좋아요. 날씨가 좋아가지고 매일매일 나갈 때마다 되게 기분 좋게 생각을 하고 있어요.
난 ATEEZ보다 나한테 잘생겼다고 얘기를 해줘요.
뭐라고?
ATEEZ분들이 나한테 잘생겼다고 얘기를 해줘요.
뭐라고?
In that last clip, San was saying that his fans compliment him on his looks, and Mingi keeps pretending that he didn't hear what he said. So San doesn't shout out that often. His voice is still relatively soft, but he does talk a bit louder in those cases that I mentioned. But when San is being serious, or whenever he's speaking politely, and just, I think most of the time, his voice gets soft. I mean, listen to how soft his voice is in this earlier clip from, I believe, 2018, where he's introducing one of his stuffed animals.
인형을 너무 좋아해서 인형을 좀 약간 수집을 많이 하는 좀 좋아해요. 되게 좋아해요.
이번 여행 갈 때도 인형 챙기나요?
이번에 새 식구를 입양했거든요. 이번에 얘 이름이 시버라고 하거든요.
시버요?
네. 얘 인사 드리고.
The Korean word for a Shiba Inu dog is Shiba-gyeon, so he named his stuffed animal Shiba, and apparently he still has it somewhere at home. So overall, I think that San has one of the softest voices in ATEEZ, maybe right after Seonghwa and Yeosang, but not Wooyoung. We'll talk about Wooyoung later. Okay, next is something that I'm really excited to introduce to you, and that is San's usage of dialect. Because as I mentioned, San grew up in Namhae, which is in the Gyeongsang province. Now, not everyone who grows up in the Gyeongsang province can speak dialect well, but he had an advantage for learning dialect that most people, even in that area, don't get. Not only did he live in Namhae all the way until he was in high school, but also he was raised mostly by his grandparents more than his parents. And I have a clip of him explaining that here.
어렸을 때부터 엄마 아빠 전부 다 할머니 할아버지 손에 많이 컸기 때문에
And when I heard about this fact, I immediately knew that he would be able to speak dialect without having to check, but I checked anyway, and yes, he does know dialect. Now, all of you are probably familiar with the sentence that he uses in the song The Real, which I have a clip of here.
이게 바로 무신기라.
What he says here is 이게 바로 멋인기라. In standard Korean, this part would be 멋인 거야, and this uses the same dialect as Seonghwa, since he's also from the Gyeongsang province. And it also uses that same ending, 기라, which means 거야 in standard Korean. So I was paying close attention to San's dialect each time I watched him, and it's pretty easy to catch when he's speaking in dialect. So I won't overwhelm you with too many examples of his dialect, but let's just look at a few clips. First, here's a clip of him and Seonghwa both using dialect and recording a wake-up call together. And they recorded two versions, one where they act tough and one where they're kind. So first, let's listen to the tough one.
일어나라. 빨리 일어나라.
퍼뜩 일어나라.
씻어라 뭐 하는데?
몇 번 말하노?
보고 싶다 아이가. 아직도 안 일어났어. 빨리 일어나라 보고 싶다.
A common verb ending to pay attention to in this dialect is the ending la, which is a ending used for making a command. It's also used in standard Korean too, but it tends to get used more often in dialect. It's kind of a strong but friendly way to tell a close friend to do something. And one more verb ending to look out for is 다이가, which at first glance looks just like the ending 다이, which we saw Yoonho using, who's from the city of Gwangju in the South Jeolla province.
예, 해야 쓰겄다. 해야 쓰겄다.
However, 다이가 with the ga added to the end is actually a different verb ending, and it originally comes from the verb 아니다, meaning to not be, but it's conjugated into a question. So 아니다 becomes 아니가, which is shortened to just 아이가. And essentially, it's a dialect version of the 잖아 or 잖아요 ending in standard Korean, which means isn't it? So to make it, you take the regular plain form and attach 이가. So if you have the verb 하다, you normally get 한다 in standard Korean or 한다이가 in dialect. And this is a super common dialect ending to look for, in fact, in all dialects in the Gyeongsang province. But don't only pay attention to the words that he's using, also pay attention to his intonation. So let's look at his intonation in this clip that I just shared.
보고 싶다 아이가. 아직도 안 일어났어. 빨리 일어나라 보고 싶다.
You can see it's more wavy than a sentence in standard Korean. His intonation goes up and down in the middle of his sentences, noticeably more than usual, and that makes it easy to tell when he's using dialect.
이 솔직히 얘기하면은 침대에 라면 없는 거는 뭐 땅바닥에서 자면 되니까 그럴 수 있지.
Now let's look at when he's speaking dialect in a more friendly way. Here's another part of that same clip, and pay attention to his verb endings and intonation.
자기야 보고 싶다. 자기야 뭐 하는데?
You'll hear that la ending like before, and you might have heard him saying 뭐 하는데. This 대 ending is a regular ending also used commonly in standard Korean, and it's used in a lot of situations, but here it's being used to ask someone to explain something to you. And you'll hear it used a bit more often in this dialect as a sentence ending. So let's look at his intonation just one more time in this part.
자기야 뭐 하는데?
Notice how, although he's asking a question, he asked, "What are you doing?" But the end of his sentence doesn't go down very much compared to a normal question. And that's just part of the way that the 대 form gets used in this dialect. Now, I should be clear that most of the time when San is speaking, he's not using any dialect. Even when he's speaking with his parents, he's speaking the same as anyone else who was born in Seoul. However, there was a phone call that I heard him have with his mother, and toward the end of the phone call, when he started to cry a bit, you can hear that sort of intonation kind of start to come out. Here's the clip.
전화해줘서
울지 마라.
감동 줬다 이거 네가 엄마한테.
울지 마라.
But again, you're not going to hear him accidentally using his dialect because most of what he hears every day around him is just standard Korean, and that's what he's adapted his own speaking to. Okay, next I want to talk briefly about San's handwriting. So let's look at a letter he wrote to ATEEZ. My first impression of his handwriting is that it's actually very nice. Now, at first glance, it might be hard to read this because he wrote it with a marker, so the letters are a bit thick and pressed together. But the strokes that he drew for the letters and the overall balance of his syllables is quite good. And all of his letters are consistent. He writes them the same way each time, which really shows to me that he's done a lot of writing. And I looked this up, and apparently San said that he likes to write poetry, which explains how he has such nice writing. Now, I would love to analyze one of his poems for you, but he hasn't shared them with anyone yet. Maybe he'll release a poetry book someday. I know you're watching this video, San. Do it. So let's look at some of his syllables, and I really like how he writes the consonant 시옷. That's the letter S, which is used in his name. Because this letter is supposed to be written with one stroke going down and to the left, followed by a second shorter stroke that goes down and to the right. But what tends to happen is people just write this one like an upside down letter V. They'll just write it with one stroke so it's faster. Or they might keep their pen on the page while drawing it and it'll end up looking something like this. So I really like how San writes this letter naturally and also with the correct stroke order. I even like his little snakes that he draws for the consonant lir, which is the L letter. For example, when he writes the word 우리 at the very top, which isn't technically the correct stroke order. It's supposed to have 3 strokes, but because all of his letters are so smooth, I think that it matches the style. I mean, look at how he writes 사랑해요. Everything looks smooth and round. Now, it's not perfect. There are some spots where he squishes his letters together a bit too close, like where he wrote 한 걸음에. He didn't completely draw the consonant iung, that's the circle letter, and he didn't space the letters in the word 걸음. So they're not as neat, and I think that he was rushing there. So if he cleans up his letters just a little bit, making sure to keep his letters spaced apart a bit better, this could legitimately be a font. Okay, the next letter that I want to share is actually a bunch of short notes that he wrote to the other members. And I'm showing you this because there are a few things that he commonly does I want to point out. First of all, he ends a lot of his notes with PS, just something to look out for. And he also uses a lot of those kiuk letters. That's the letter for K. And that's basically for laughing. So one of them is like he, 2 is haha, and 3 or more is basically LOL. And this letter is filled with laughing as well as a ton of exclamation marks. In fact, I think he yells and laughs more in his writing than he even does in person. And it's fun. It makes these letters lighthearted and friendly. He even draws little faces on some of them. But anyway, as for his writing, I see the same traits as before. Actually, a little bit nicer. In his letter to Hongjung, he writes 앞으로도 행복하자, meaning let's keep being happy, followed by 사랑해, I love you, followed by lots of giggling. But while he's writing all of his sentences casually, he's also speaking from the heart in what he writes. To Seonghwa, he writes some jokes like 우리 방도 좀 치워주라, meaning clean my room too. And then 너 청소 잘하잖아, meaning you're good at cleaning, you know? And as we know, Seonghwa is the member who strangely enjoys cleaning. But then at the bottom, San ends his note by saying this. 힘든 일 있을 때마다 감싸줘서 고마워. So thanks for sticking up for me whenever things are tough. 진심이야. I'm serious. Now, I can't go over all of these because there are a lot, but let's just look at the note that he wrote for Mingi. Mingi, 안녕. Mingi, hey. Skipping down a line, he writes, 오래 봤지만 넌 여전히 멋있어. I've known you for a long time, but you're cool as always. And I can tell that San appreciates the other members a lot because half of his notes are sincere compliments like these. And he continues, 너에게 참 많은 걸 배웠지. I've learned so much from you. And then 넌 멋있어, again meaning you're cool. I get the impression that while San isn't always expressing his feelings vocally, that he has really strong emotions on the inside, and I can see some of that when I read his letters. Not just these notes, but also a few others I was able to find in my research. Okay, now there's still one more thing I haven't talked about, and that's San's usage of filler words. And while he uses a lot of filler words, there were 2 that I noticed him using a lot more commonly than the others. And those are, well, see if you can find the first one.
사실 이렇게 하고 사실 저는 이런 남는 시간에 운동을 많이 해요. 사실 매 무대마다 이제
We also saw Hongjung use this word often, and that is the word 사실. Now, 사실 is a noun that means truth or fact, and you can use it to mean actually or in fact. And I noticed that San likes to use this word when he's explaining things, but there's another filler word that he uses even more than this one, and let's see if you can find it in this clip.
그리고 나서는 이제 이제 귀하고 이제 레드카펫을 이제 본 무대를 준비해야 돼서 ATEEZ 나 이제 들어왔습니다. 제품 클렌징을 해야 합니다. 밥 먹고 이제 양치를 하고 자야죠 이제. 아무튼 저는 이제 잘 준비를 마쳤고 이제 할 겁니다. 듣고 가는 것 같습니다. 이제 오늘 한국으로 돌아가면 또
이제 means now or from now and is a normal word that you can use to say that something's happening now or that you're going to do something now. But as a filler word, it means like, now I'm going to say something, so listen to me. Now, this is a really common filler word. We saw Hongjung, Seonghwa, and Yosang all use this filler word, but San uses it as well, so just keep an eye out for it. And okay, I could keep going, but we still have 3 more members to analyze, so that's enough about San for today.
와, somebody help me. 이 맛의 축제에서 누가 날 좀 꺼내줘요. Gorgeous, excellent, unbelievable, amazing, Spider-Man 2.
산임이 시켜요.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and also subscribe to my channel for more Korean learning content. Thank you again to the sponsor of this video, all of my Patreon supporters and channel members. And if you would like to support my channel, there are links in the video description box. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.